Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So I have been getting a lot of requests to do these weekly or bi-weekly, I guess, predictions for Formula One, particularly because I have the charts for Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. So this time we're in Austria. Now I will put some clips because I was very excited about the fact that Lewis won in Barcelona, which I predicted because the moon, Mercury was conjunct his moon, which is very victorious, and I said it was going to be so emotional and sentimental, so I'll put a couple of clips here. And I was like, he's going to be tearful, it's going to be amazing to have his first win with Ferrari, and he of course was very tearful and it was very sentimental. And I mean, bloody hell, I thought I'd won the race myself. I actually got 2 emails saying congrats. I was like, I didn't win anything, I didn't do anything. And we had an all British podium for the first time in like ages, right? Like, was it 40-50 years or something like that? So then I had someone congratulate me on the British podium because I'm British, and I was like, thanks, I wasn't there, I didn't do this amazing race, right? But I thought that was really cute because I was like, oh, that's so nice. And it was really lovely to get people messaging me privately and being like, it made me think of you. So I was like, okay, this is really awesome. At the moment, I think it's been about 3 races I've predicted pretty accurately. Again, this is just for fun. I'm not like here being like I have to predict it. Although I did see this betting platform in America called Kalshi, and there was like, you could bet on Kimi versus Lewis Hamilton, and I was like, imagine like how much money I would get if I was doing that. I don't really like, I used to bet actually on boxing matches because I used to do martial arts, so I was like, oh, I know exactly who's going to win. But it's a slippery slope. So don't bet, kids, it's not good for you. And I'm not going to do it, but sometimes I think, should I? Okay, so yeah, obviously Lewis won in Barcelona, which is amazing. Charles had another really difficult weekend, which I also predicted. He's had so many squares to Saturn and to his moon as well. And I will go on to it later, but I still don't think he's having a good week. It's just really not going well. He's in a Saturn return in 6th house, which is basically a lot of backlash publicly as well. Like, people are like, is he the driver that we thought he was? I'm not someone to pile on, so I'm not going to do that, but I do think that there is some room to discuss it because Charles needs an astrologer. The problem is, or a coach, because the problem is he's a great guy and he's friendly and he's really very lovely. I mean, I support him for sure, but he will never learn from his mistakes. He's like chasing his own tail. I wish I could sit him down and be like, this is your chart, these are your tendencies, you really need to do something different here, right? Because he's in also a Wheel of Fortune number 10 year, which is, well, what's the Wheel of Fortune? It's a wheel that goes round and round and round until you jump off of it. Interestingly, Toto Wolff is also in number 10 year. There is a weird connection between Toto, Kimi and Lewis this year, which I'll explain in another video probably. But I absolutely think these 3 are linked together somehow. It's going to become more evident, I think, as time goes on. But they're also in this kind of like chasing tail energy. So I'm going to go on to Lewis Hamilton and look at his chart. I'm going to look at qualifying and then the race. So I want to talk about the race first, just because I think that's probably the most important. So with the race, I've got something quite interesting here, which is we've got Venus in Leo in the 10th house of public career and notoriety, and of course Venus being in Leo, which is obviously very confident, very sort of egoic, in the 10th house is really shining, so it brings some harmony. Of course, when Lewis won his race with Ferrari, his first race with Ferrari, we had Venus at like 1 degree, super potent, right? And you might argue, oh yeah, but so did Charles. Yes, that's very true, but as I already mentioned, we had that Jupiter square to Saturn, which is much more powerful when it comes to things like that. So it's always a mix, because there's always good and bad things going on in a chart, right? You can crash, but it's not like the worst thing in the world. You can sort of get up and brush yourself off. So we've got Venus in the 10th house, and it's actually making a pretty much direct exact square to his Scorpio rising ascendant, right? So when you've got Venus square the ascendant, this is going to come through in different ways. Now, Venus squares are not necessarily the worst thing in the world because Venus is a benefic, so it's not like it was like a Saturn square, which in that case I'd be like, no. But there's two ways I think this is going to manifest. One is that there is a difficulty between his public persona and his privacy. Recently, one of the F1 journalists had posted a video about Lewis being on the phone to Kim and her children, and he put a comment saying, "I really get no privacy," which I think is very emblematic of Venus being in the 10th house and being very close square to your ascendant, because you have a public persona which is probably to be like a nice guy and, you know, what people want you to be, but then in private it's like, I don't want you to know my business, because you're not really entitled to it, and we're not entitled to his business, right? He's a private person, and I don't think that we should be getting into his business, particularly his partner, who he's only really just started to be open about, and I think we should leave him alone. So I can see that happening. The second thing is it really brings vibes of old Lewis Hamilton's coming back, you know, like a little bit arrogant, a little bit like, you know, he chucks the trophy up and he has that sort of like classic, it's hammer time, right? And because of that, it can really be super arrogant, and some people are going to be like, whoa, aren't we getting a bit too big for our boots, right? So I would be very surprised if we don't get some discourse about him being a bit cocky here. I do think that it's not a bad aspect, it's actually, it can be quite victorious. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a bad race for him. One thing I will also mention is that the moon is supporting him in both qualifying and in the race in his second house. The second house is really about foundations, so this shows, you know, you've got strong foundations. In Sagittarius as well, I think Ferrari's got a really good engine for Austria. Also, we know that Mercedes don't do that well in high temperatures. I mean, it's freaking boiling here in England right now. It's like 33 degrees. I was just in Switzerland a couple of days ago. It was 35. Austria's going to be really hot because, you know, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, when they go in the summer and it gets hot, it gets hot. It's like walking into a literal oven. It's a different type of heat. It's not like Arabic heat where you're like, oh, we're doing this thing in Saudi Arabia. It's different. It's just different. So I don't know how Mercedes engines are going to act there. I think the tyre degradation could be worse as well. So Ferrari could actually have an upper hand there. And I think we could probably see that in the chart. So I, again, would be surprised if Lewis doesn't get a podium this week. I would suspect him to have a podium. I think it could be quite victorious. I think actually, if we look at the Venus square rising, it's like the arrogance of like, I got another win. You know what I mean? So I think that could be quite fascinating. Of course, I haven't really like, you know, I could go very in depth here. But I would say that it's a pretty good chart. I don't think it's anything too nasty. We do have Uranus exactly conjunct his natal Chiron in the 8th house, but as I mentioned before, that's not something to worry about. It's more about him conquering his own fear of his retirement and his mortality and what he's here to do. And, you know, I think there's also probably a little bit of anxiety there because he probably has to really perform now. Also, I think he probably could be a little bit snappy with some of the engineers this weekend as well, but it's probably just because he's got the pressure to like, I'm second in the world championship now, I really need to be chasing this down. And as he said, it's much easier to chase than it is to defend. So I think his chart looks pretty okay. Now we do have that Venus square to the ascendant, but as you can see, it is kind of close to being in a well, I always say that it should be 10 degrees between a square. So if we look at Saturn, it's 25 degrees and we've got Venus at 17. So we've got about an 8-degree gap. I think that probably counts, but it's not far enough for me to be like, oh, that's smack bang being a problem. The thing is, Formula One is so detailed. So whenever these predictions are accurate is when these exact conjunctions or squares or oppositions take place. So Venus square Saturn can really be putting in the discipline needed. So he's going to be working hard here. But again, it's the arrogance of like, I can really do it. So I think for Lewis, it's more like really taking on the behavior of becoming a champion in his mind again. And like you said, proving that you remember who you are. Because that one fan was like, remember who you are. I know that he doesn't watch my videos because obviously why the fuck would he? Because like they don't get that many views. But I want to be like, hello, I was here a year ago saying that you were going to come back. Like, I am one of you. I was like, I'm better than that guy who remember who you are. I was telling everyone you were going to win. And I was kidding. But yeah, I think it's quite fascinating just seeing that sort of behaviour come up. Okay, let's look at Charles. So one thing I just immediately saw in qualifying, the moon is conjunct his natal Venus in the second house. Really lovely. This is nice. Could do really well in qualifying, actually. I think that, you know, when you've got the moon in Sagittarius as well, it's very opportunistic. It's like looking at different angles on top of Venus in the second house, again, of that confidence and stability. Again, I think him and Lewis will do quite well in qualifying. And in the race, there's going to be different dynamics, but the moon is, again, being conjunct exactly Venus, I think, is really very supportive and lucky for the race. I also made a prediction on my TikTok, but I'll put it here. I think that Charles is about to become a father because the North Node is going to move into his 4th house, which is where his natal Jupiter is. This is a good indicator of starting a family and having multiple children. Now, there are rumors that Alexandra is pregnant. I am not someone to speculate about those kinds of things because I don't think we should be commenting on women's bodies and whatnot, but I had the feeling a couple of months ago that they might be starting a family. And of course, because Lewis and Charles both are Scorpio rising, Lewis is becoming more of a stepdad to Kim Kardashian's children, and people are saying, oh no, he will never be that. Yes, he already is. Like, he's been her partner. Like, he can't not be involved in her children's life. He doesn't have to take the mantle of being their father, does he? But he's definitely probably there and being around them. Whereas I think Charles is actually becoming a father. And I think he would do fantastic as a father, you know. I think he would do really well, and having Jupiter in Aquarius in the 4th house also shows a really good indicator of him having multiple children. So the North Node is going to move there and amplify it and be like the point of fate for him. And a lot of personal readings I've done recently where people are having children, the North Node is really sort of focusing on that. So I think that would be really fantastic for him. And actually, in fact, that Charles is going through what you call a reverse nodal return, because his natal South Node is in Pisces and the transit North Node is in Pisces. So that's what we call a reverse nodal return, which is an interesting kind of dynamic when it comes to the push and pull of what you should be moving towards and, again, what you should be leaving. And as we know, I think he's just not learning mistakes very easily. But I do think that the moon supports him quite well in qualifying here. Now, the sun in the 9th house in Cancer is exactly trining his natal Chiron in Scorpio. So this is like his ambitions and goals and the opportunity in front of him, like the horizon of like, I can do this, I can win a championship, for example, is quite harmonious with him trying to get over this wound. I really think that his, you know, ability to see Lewis and get quite freaked out that Lewis could be the one to save Ferrari, and he's meant to be, what do they call him? Predestinato or something like that, like the chosen one, and he may not be the chosen one. So he's really got to get over this Chiron wound, right? Having Chiron and Scorpio in the 1st house ain't nothing to play with, right? So he needs to get over that trauma quickly. So the sun trining that, it brings a little bit more personality. I think we could see more of his personality this weekend, maybe a little bit sort of like cheeky, but he's definitely trying to conquer that fear. Again, he's on a Saturn return and it's pretty close. We've got 14-degree Saturn transit on top of his natal Saturn at 16 degrees. It's, yeah, that's a Saturn return, all right, in the 6th house of responsibility and reliability. He's really holding, you know, heavy is the head that wears the crown right now. So he's got to be the one to choose and say, I'm the one that can do this. Venus is really close to his natal midheaven, which is a good sign as well in Leo, and that in fact is also you know, trining his natal Mars in the 2nd house. So again, frustration about achieving things, a lot of frustration for Charles. If we look at the race, if I move on to the race, one thing that really stood out to me is that Mercury is squaring Mercury. Yikes. I don't like this. I don't like this for internal tension at all. So there's a difference between internal tension and external tension. If anyone works in business or strategy, you know that these are very different things. But when we have Mercury square Mercury, it's internal tension, right? So we've got the mind and communication in Cancer, which is very sentimental, but it's squaring his natal Mercury in Libra. So it's kind of like he wants to keep the peace, but when you've got Mercury in the 12th house, you can't fundamentally get your point across. Or if we look at Mercury being engineering, speed, and again, mechanical parts, we're then seeing that something is just not fundamentally clicking here, right? It's kind of like, I would say it's like when team messaging gets wrong. Remember what happened when it was like, you need to go to the pits. No, you don't need to go back out. It's kind of like, I think he could fuck the strategy up here in the race. I think, again, qualifying in race, it's like gets a good position, maybe actually gets really close, but then there's just a clash with communication here. And again, I don't think with Ferrari that's hard to predict, is it? But I think they've been doing okay. It just depends on how they're going to react, because it's super emotional. We're also like literally a day away from Mercury stationing retrograde in Cancer, which in the 9th house ain't nothing to play with. Like, that's not good, right? Jupiter's at 29 degrees. It's about to go into Leo the next day. So Jupiter leaves its final gifts on its last few days, which can bring abundance. So all in all, it's a hard one to predict because I see some really good things where I'm like, I think he could have a good position. And there's other ones where I'm like, no. Do I think Lewis is going to do better? Yes. But that's just because Lewis has a better chart overall, right? So I think Charles is struggling a bit with the communication, but I don't necessarily think it's like, ooh, I think I'm just like getting flustered by it because that Saturn return is just like, no, I don't like it. It's really harsh in the 6th house. It's also, you know, it's getting very close to being opposite his sun soon. And I don't like that. So I think there's just going to be some difficulty for him overall, because people go saying to me, when is he going to come out of this slump? I'm like, I wouldn't hold your breath. I think there's some weeks where he's better, some weeks where he's not. But I think we know he's not winning this championship. I mean, he's just like, I mean, he's closer to Pierre Gasly than he is to anyone else. And I'm like, and that's no shade on Pierre Gasly, he's doing fantastic. But I'm just saying, like, you wouldn't expect that, would you, with a Ferrari and Alpine? So I think that he could have bigger communication issues and like clashes with like the philosophy of the race and strategy this week more than anyone else. Okay, so let's move on to Max Verstappen, who is not won a race this year, and he's in the opposite energy for Destiny Matrix, which was number 7, the Chariot, which is like the fastest card in the deck. At the moment, he's really struggling. So we've got the Moon in Sagittarius in his 1st house, which is really supporting him. It's making him more emotionally regulated because it's going to pass over his natal Pluto and obviously his ascendant. So that just gives him a nice push. I think for him, qualifying might be a little better than the race, but we'll see. We've also got Venus in Leo in the 9th house, and that's going to be opposite Jupiter in the 3rd in Aquarius. Venus opposite Jupiter is very similar to the transit we had in Monaco, with Lewis doing quite well. So I think that could be interesting kind of race for him. He's also got you know, he's got this reverse nodal return similar to Charles Leclerc as well, which I think for him is trying to understand in the 4th house about whether he wants to retire and do something fun or whether he wants to continue racing, because of course Saturn's in his 5th house and it's basically causing problems as well. So you'll notice that Charles got Saturn return at 16 degrees and Max has a Saturn return at 17 degrees, so they're both really struggling with the car this year, and just their driving skills, I guess. My Max is an amazing driver, of course, but I think he's struggling because I don't think he's finding it fun, and obviously in the 5th house of playfulness and fun, it's not really great, is it? So I think for him, you know, that Saturn return is doing its thing where he's a bit like, I don't really know what I want to do, and I think he's got more pursuits with family at the moment with that reverse nodal return. Very similar to Charles, we've got the Sun, and it's trining the natal Chiron in the 12th, another difficulty. So I feel like Max is closer to Charles than he is to Lewis in this particular race, but I also don't think it's terrible. Like I said, I think the Moon supports him in the 1st house, and in fact the Moon is somewhat trining his natal Saturn as well. So I feel like he might have a bit of fun in this race. Maybe he kind of enjoys it being maybe a little bit further to the front. But I don't think anything is giving me like major victory here either. So I think it could just be like you do okay, but you also don't do terrible either. Okay, so actually I decided to look at Kimi Antonee's chart just to see if it's correct. So we have him in Scorpio rising like Lewis and Charles, but completely different because Kimi's quite young. So one thing I noticed, he's got Jupiter natally in his 1st house, bringing him natural luck. You know, these people get away with anything, scot-free as well. Particularly in Scorpio is quite fascinating. I'm like, okay, I think for him, this is, yeah, definitely natural luck. I also think he's got this like wholesome image, but it really doesn't align to Jupiter being in Scorpio. So again, I'm like, I want to test this chart. One thing I saw was the transit Moon, which is going to be trining his natal Mercury in the 10th house. This is good for a podium. I'd like this for a podium. I think that's pretty successful. And he's also got a near exact Venus return in Leo in the 10th house as well. So by near exact, I mean that they're 2 degrees away, obviously really fantastic for championship mentality and being like, yeah, we're winning. But again, to have that exact Jupiter return is normally a good time of life. Venus return is a good time of life. So Venus return, you know, this is really beautiful, especially in the 10th house, because it really gives us validation. Next thing I noticed was just like Charlie's got a Saturn natally in the 6th house, of course not having a Saturn return because he's not old enough, but he is having to bear the responsibility of what a championship might mean for someone so young. So it's definitely giving heavy is the head that wears the crown. So many different things to analyze, but I just want to say that I think it looks pretty decent for a podium. If it's not correct, I'm really not sure about this chart, so I'm not going to really like say yes, I'm definitely correct. I want to kind of use this as an experiment, but the moon supporting Mercury, I quite like that. Okay, so those are my predictions for the drivers that I have 4 charts for. We're going to do some experiments with Kimi's chart, and then I'll keep you posted. Now, do I think that Ferrari will do quite well this weekend? I think Lewis can do quite well. I think Charles actually might do okay in qualifying if he doesn't crash. But I also think there's real tension between communication and strategy this weekend for him. Max looks like he's just sort of okay, neutral. I think like last time he was saying, you know, it was kind of a boring race. I was just in the middle somewhere. But again, I think the moon supports him and makes him seem more regulated. But the Chiron clash to the sun is interesting. Again, it's not a clash as such because it's a trine, so it's quite harmonious, but I think it's more of a battling of fear of fading out or losing something. I think all these drivers, as much as they say they don't care, they do care about their ego and they do care about being a champion and their prominence. So I think that's also something for him to talk about. Because last year he was like, we're never going to get anything, and then he's like 2 points away from winning the championship, right? So I think it's important that they're honest with themselves about where they are in the ranking. Okay, leave me a comment below if you're interested in that, what your thoughts are, and anything else you'd like me to cover. I'm going to try and do all the races. I will be doing some live predictions from Silverstone probably, because I'm going to be there for the races. So it'd be really cool to do it in real time. And I'm also going to see if I can speak to some engineers and be like, what do you think about X, Y, Z? Because people being like, oh yeah, like they're not going to care. I'm doing an event for Netflix this week, which I'm so grateful for. But I'm like, people, and this is all people in business, right? So astrology is not just like this poppy thing. People do use it, and that's why I'm saying, like, I don't know if F1 drivers use astrology, probably absolutely not, but if they were ever interested in it, I would love to sit down and be like, this is what you should be doing, this is what you should be moving towards. Like Charles, I think he's amazing, but God, he needs a lifestyle coach. So it's like, please, we need to get your head in the game. He needs like someone like me who's sat and roared and can be like military coach style, because I think people are being too sort of nice around him. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you soon. Bye.